The music hurt Lyrian's ears even though everyone else seemed to enjoy it. She pressed herself against the cold stone pillar at the edge of the ballroom and ran her fingers along the carved patterns in the rock. The texture helped her think about something other than the noise and the lights and the too many people moving around in their bright ceremonial robes. Nobody looked at her. That was how she preferred it most days. Looking at people meant they might look back, and then they would expect her to say something, and her mouth never worked right when people stared at her. Her mother, the Empress, stood at the center of the grand hall, surrounded by delegates from a dozen different worlds. They laughed at something her older sister Natera said. Natera always knew what to say. She smiled at the right times and touched people's arms in that casual way that made them feel important. Lyrian had tried to learn that once when she was younger, but touching strangers made her skin feel wrong for hours afterward. The servants knew to stay away from her corner. They had learned years ago that Princess Lyrian did not want attention. Some of them whispered that she was simple-minded. Others said it more kindly and called her delicate. Lyrian heard all of it because people thought she did not understand when they talked about her. They were wrong about that. She understood everything. Her brain just worked differently than theirs, and they had decided that different meant broken, that a human diplomat walked past her pillar, and Lyrian froze. Humans were new to the Galactic Assembly. Only 5 years since first contact. This one wore the simple gray suit that Earth diplomats favored instead of the flowing robes most species preferred. He stopped walking and turned his head slightly toward her, but did not look directly at her face. That was unusual. Most people either ignored her completely or stared too much. The human whose name badge said Davidson stood quietly for a moment. Then he spoke in a low voice that did not bounce off the high ceilings like everyone else's voices did. "The music is quite loud," he said to the air near her rather than at her. "I imagine the lights are bright too." Lyrian's fingers stopped moving on the pillar. How'd he know that? Nobody ever mentioned the lights or the noise. They just told her to try harder to tolerate normal things. "I have a nephew back on Earth." The human continued in that same gentle voice. "He is 7 years old, and he is not like loud spaces either. He carries a smooth stone in his pocket that he rubs when things get overwhelming. It helps him focus." Lyrian pulled her hand away from the pillar and looked at the stone she had been carrying in her robe pocket. It was purple crystal worn smooth from years of handling. She held it up slightly so the human could see it. Davidson smiled, but it was a small smile that did not show too many teeth. "That is a beautiful stone, much nicer than the one my nephew has." The music shifted to a slower rhythm, and people began pairing off for the traditional first dance of the evening. Lyrian watched her sister glide across the floor with the Torvan ambassador. Natera made it look easy. Lyrian had tried dancing lessons when she was 12, and the instructor had given up after 3 sessions because she could not seem to follow the steps everyone else learned quickly. "Do you like the music even though it is loud?" David asked. Lyrian nodded once. She did like music when it was not too overwhelming. She especially liked the mathematical patterns in traditional Carthani compositions. The way the notes followed specific ratios and sequences made sense to her in a way that conversations never did. "Would you like to dance?" the human asked. "Not the traditional way. We could find a quieter spot and move however feels comfortable to you." Lyrian's heart beat faster. Nobody had ever asked her to dance. Nobody asked her to do anything public because they worried she would embarrass them. She looked at David Chin's outstretched hand. His palm was facing up, which meant she could choose to take it or not. He was not grabbing at her the way some relatives did when they tried to force hugs. Her mother had told her that humans were strange. They came from a death world where everything tried to kill them, yet they were gentle with things other species considered weak. They asked questions instead of making assumptions. They seemed to think that different was interesting rather than shameful. Lyrian slowly reached out and placed her hand in David's. His grip was firm but not tight. He led her toward a corner of the ballroom where the music was softer and fewer people crowded the space. Whispers followed them. Lyrian heard someone say the human was wasting his time with a defective princess. She heard another person laugh quietly. Chancellor Vormiz started to move toward them, but her mother held up one hand to stop him. Lyrian glanced at the Empress and saw something unexpected on her face. Curiosity, David did not try to pull Lyrian into the traditional dance position. Instead, he stood beside her and swayed gently to the music. Lyrian matched his movement. It felt natural. She did not have to worry about stepping on his feet or remembering complicated patterns. They just moved together in a simple rhythm. After a minute, Lyrian began to hum along with the music. The sound surprised her because she rarely made sounds in public. But David did not react strangely. He just kept swaying and let her hum. When the song ended, David stepped back and gave a small bow. Lyrian lifted her hands and made the gesture sign for thank you in formal Carthani sign language. Then she added another sign that she had learned from ancient texts but never used because nobody expected her to know formal court language. The translator standing nearby gasped. Lyrian had signed, "You see me," in the old dialect that only scholars studied. Her mother walked over with Chancellor Vormiz behind her looking worried. The Empress stared at her youngest daughter as if seeing her for the first time. "Perhaps we should speak privately," the Empress said quietly. She looked at David. "You will join us, human diplomat. I think we have much to discuss about my daughter." The private chamber was better than the ballroom. Smaller, quieter, only 5 people inside instead of hundreds. Lyrian sat in a chair near the window and held her purple stone while the adults talked about her, as if she was not there. They had been doing that her whole life. Chancellor Vormiz paced back and forth across the thick carpet. The human made a spectacle of the princess in front of the entire galactic assembly. "This could damage our reputation." "He danced with her," the Empress said. Her voice was tired. "That is hardly a scandal. Your Majesty, she cannot even speak properly. Everyone saw her making those hand movements. They will think the royal bloodline is weak." Lyrian pressed the stone harder in her palm. She hated when people talked about her voice. She could speak. The words just got stuck between her brain and her mouth most of the time. It was like trying to push something heavy uphill. Sometimes she managed it, but the effort exhausted her. David Chun sat calmly in his chair with his hands folded in his lap. "Chancellor Vormiz, I respectfully disagree with your assessment. What I saw was an intelligent young woman who communicates differently than you expect. That is not the same as being unable to communicate. She is simple," Vormiz said flatly. "Our best medical scholars examined her years ago. Her mind did not develop correctly. Did those scholars consider that her mind might have developed differently rather than incorrectly?" David asked. The Empress looked at the human diplomat with interest. "Explain what you mean." David pulled out a small data pad from his jacket pocket. "On Earth, we have learned to recognize different neurological patterns. One is called autism. People with autism process information in unique ways. They might struggle with verbal communication or social expectations, but excel at pattern recognition, detailed analysis, and logical thinking. They often have sensory sensitivities to light, sound, and touch. Does any of this sound familiar?" Lyrian stopped rocking and stared at David. He was describing her. Everything he said matched how she experienced the world. But he was not saying she was broken. He was saying she was different. The Empress stood and walked to her daughter's chair. She knelt down, so they were at eye level. "Lyrian, can you understand what we are saying?" Lyrian nodded quickly. She always understood. Always. "Can you read and write?" Another nod. Lyrian pointed at the data pad on the table near Chancellor Vormiz. The Empress picked it up and handed it to her daughter. Lyrian's fingers flew across the screen. She had taught herself to type years ago by watching lessons meant for the palace staff. Nobody had noticed because nobody paid attention to what she did in her rooms. She turned the screen around so everyone could see what she had written. "I understand everything said around me. I read 3 languages fluently and study mathematics and astrophysics through the palace archive system. I attend all state briefings through the video feeds in my quarters. I have been following the current trade negotiations and have identified 4 logical flaws in the proposed routes through the Velar Nebula. My mind works perfectly well. My mouth simply does not cooperate with expressing my thoughts verbally most of the time." The Empress's face went pale. She read the message 3 times. Chancellor Vormiz grabbed the pad and read it himself. "This is impossible. She has never demonstrated this level of comprehension." "You never gave her the opportunity," David said quietly. You decided she was incapable and stopped looking for evidence to the contrary. The trade negotiations, the Empress said slowly. You have been following them? You have found flaws. Lyrian took back the pad and typed rapidly. The proposed main route passes too close to the binary star system in Sector 47. The gravitational fluctuations during stellar alignment will make it impassable 6 months out of every cycle. The backup route assumes stable conditions in the asteroid field, but recent surveys show increased comet activity that will require constant navigation adjustments. The third option through neutral territory depends on maintaining good relations with the Torvin Collective, but their current political climate is unstable. I have identified a fourth route that nobody has mentioned. It is longer but more reliable. The Empress stood and walked to the window. She was quiet for a long time. When she turned back, her eyes were wet. 23 years, she whispered. I have had a brilliant daughter for 23 years, and I treated her like a child who could not understand her own life. You did not know, David said. Your culture taught you to look for intelligence in a specific way. When you did not see it expressed traditionally, you assumed it was not there. That is not an excuse. The Empress looked at Lyrian. My daughter, I have failed you. I let them hide you away. I let them call you simple. I never questioned whether they were right. Lyrian typed again. You loved me. You were kind even when you did not understand me. That matters. Chancellor Vormiz shook his head. This changes nothing. Even if the princess is intelligent, she cannot fulfill any public role. She cannot speak to delegates or attend formal functions without assistance. The other powers will see this as weakness. Why must she fulfill roles designed for neurotypical individuals? David asked. On Earth, we have learned to create accommodations. We design roles around people's strengths rather than forcing everyone into the same narrow definition of capability. Accommodations. The Empress repeated the word slowly. Princess Lyrian clearly has analytical gifts. She processes complex information and identifies patterns others miss. These are valuable skills in diplomacy and governance. She simply needs to communicate through writing or typing rather than speech. Many successful human diplomats use similar methods. Our tradition requires verbal discourse, Vormiz said. Then perhaps your tradition needs to expand. David looked at Lyrian. The question is not whether the princess can participate in galactic affairs. The question is whether you will allow her to contribute in her own way. The Empress sat down heavily. She looked at her daughter, really looked at her for what felt like the first time. What do you want, Lyrian? If you could choose, how would you want to live your life? Lyrian's fingers moved across the screen. That I want to be useful. I want people to stop pretending I do not exist. I want to use my mind for something that matters. I do not need to be like Natera. I just need to be allowed to be myself and have that be enough. 3 days after the dance, Lyrian walked into the assembly council chamber behind her mother. Every head turned to stare. She wore special headphones that David had helped her obtain from the human delegation. They reduced the harsh echo of voices without blocking sound completely. Her datapad was strapped to her left arm, where she could access it quickly. Someone laughed. Not loudly, but Lyrian heard it. She recognized the voice as belonging to Duke Raldaz, who had once suggested to the Empress that Lyrian should be sent to a remote facility where she would not embarrass the royal family. Chancellor Vormiz stood at the podium, looking uncomfortable. Honored delegates, the Empress has requested that Princess Lyrian observe today's session on the Velar Nebula trade negotiations. She will be serving as an imperial analyst. An analyst? The Torvin ambassador's translator made his words sound sharp. Forgive my confusion, but I was under the impression that the princess was not involved in state matters. The Empress stood smoothly. My daughter has been studying galactic affairs for many years. I have recently learned that her insights are valuable. She will observe and provide analysis as needed. Lyrian sat in the chair that had been placed for her near the back of the room. It was not the prominent position her sister would have demanded, but Lyrian preferred it. She could see everyone without being the center of attention. David sat 3 rows ahead, representing Earth's trading interests. He glanced back once and gave her a tiny nod. The lead negotiator activated the hollow display showing the proposed trade routes. We have narrowed our options to 3 primary routes. Route Alpha passes through the northern quadrant of the nebula. Route Beta uses the southern passage. Route Gamma takes the long way around through Torvin space. For 2 hours, Lyrian listened while delegates argued. They discussed fuel costs and travel times and political implications. They brought up security concerns and maintenance requirements. But nobody mentioned the fundamental problem with all 3 routes. Her fingers flew across her datapad. When she finished typing, she hesitated. Speaking up meant everyone would look at her. It meant they would judge her and whisper and maybe laugh again. Her heart beat fast, and she started rocking slightly in her chair. David turned around in his seat. He made eye contact briefly, then looked away to give her space. But the message was clear. She had something important to say, and she should say it. Lyrian raised her hand. The room went silent. Chancellor Vormiz cleared his throat. Princess Lyrian has analysis to contribute. Her datapad connected to the main display. Her words appeared for everyone to read. Route Alpha passes within 0.8 astronomical units of the binary star system in Sector 47. During stellar alignment, which occurs every 1.3 standard years, the gravitational interference will make navigation impossible for approximately 6 months. This cycle was not mentioned in any proposals. Ships will be stranded or forced to take dangerous detours. The chief engineer for the Velar project frowned. The binary system is charted, but we calculated sufficient clearance for standard vessels. Lyrian typed again. Your calculations assume stable star positions. You did not account for the orbital mechanics during close approach. I have run the numbers using the most recent stellar surveys. The gravitational waves will extend far beyond your projected safe zone. Preposterous, Duke Ralthaz said. The princess cannot possibly understand astrophysics at that level. The chief engineer pulled up the stellar data. His face changed as he ran the calculations. She is correct. The binary approach happens in 8 months. We would have discovered this problem after significant infrastructure investment. Silence filled the chamber. The Torvin ambassador spoke carefully. What about Route Beta? Lyrian was already typing. Route Beta assumes stable conditions in the Carthan asteroid field. Recent comet activity from a nearby Oort cloud has increased debris density by 40% over the past decade. This trend will continue. Navigation will require constant course adjustments and significantly increase collision risk. Acceptable for small exploratory vessels, but not for large commercial traffic. Another delegate checked the data. Another confirmation that Lyrian was right. Route Gamma, then, someone suggested weakly. Route Gamma depends on maintaining current diplomatic relations with the Torvin Collective. Intelligence reports suggest internal political instability. There is a 70% probability of government change within 2 years. New leadership may not honor existing transit agreements. Too risky for long-term trade infrastructure. The room erupted in whispered conversations. Lyrian pulled her headphones tighter and focused on her breathing like David had taught her. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The voices were just noise. They could not hurt her. The lead negotiator looked frustrated. Then all 3 routes are flawed. We are back to the beginning. Lyrian typed one more message that I have identified a 4th option. Route Delta uses the western approach through empty space. It adds 2 weeks to travel time, but avoids all gravitational hazards, unstable political territories, and high debris fields. It requires building 3 new relay stations, which is expensive initially, but provides a stable, reliable route for generations. I have detailed specifications available if the council is interested. The Empress stood and walked to her daughter. She placed a hand gently on Lyrian's shoulder. The touch was light enough that Lyrian could tolerate it. My daughter has saved this council from a costly mistake, the Empress said clearly. She has also provided a solution that none of our experts identified. I propose that we review her detailed analysis for Route Delta. David raised his hand. Earth seconds that proposal. We would like to see Princess Lyrian's full specifications. One by one, the other delegates agreed. Even Duke Ralthaz could not argue with mathematics. The session ended 2 hours later with Route Delta approved for feasibility study. Lyrian's specifications would be reviewed by engineering teams from 6 different species. If they confirmed her work, the galaxy would use a route designed by the princess. Everyone had called simple AS delegates filed out. Several stopped to speak to the Empress. A few looked at Lyrian with new expressions. Not pity anymore. Something closer to respect. The Torvan ambassador approached slowly. He did not try to touch Lyrian or force her to make eye contact. Princess Lyrian, I would like to consult you about another route in the Northern Territories. We have concerns, but our analysts have not identified the problem. Would you be willing to review the data? Lyrian typed quickly. Yes. Send the specifications to my secure channel. I will provide analysis within 3 days. The ambassador bowed slightly and left. David appeared at her side. You were brilliant. I hope you know that. Lyrian smiled. It felt strange because she did not smile often in public. But today, she felt something new. Not happiness exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. For the first time in her life, people were seeing her not as broken, but as capable. She typed one more message just for David. Thank you for teaching me that different can be valuable. The media storm began the next morning. Someone had leaked footage of Lyrian's council appearance. Within hours, it spread across every galactic news network. The headlines were not kind. Broken princess given state role. Empress allows defective daughter to influence trade policy. Carthani royal family desperate or delusional. Lyrian sat in her quarters watching the reports scroll past on her screen. They showed clips of her rocking in her chair. They zoomed in on her headphones and called them a medical device. One analyst spent 10 minutes discussing genetic screening programs that could prevent children like her from being born. Her hand shook. She grabbed her purple stone and squeezed it until her knuckles went white. A gentle knock on the door. Not the sharp, authoritative knock of palace staff, but something softer. Lyrian, it is David. May I come in? She went to the door and opened it slightly. David stood in the hallway holding 2 cups of something warm. He did not try to enter without permission. I brought tea. The humankind, not the Carthani blend. I thought you might prefer something familiar, even if familiar means foreign. Lyrian opened the door wider. Her quarters were designed for her sensory needs. Soft lighting, thick carpets that absorb sound, minimal decoration because too many objects made her feel crowded. David had been here once before, and he remembered to move slowly and speak quietly. He set 1 cup on the table near her and sat in the chair across from her usual spot. I saw the news coverage. Lyrian nodded. She picked up her data pad. They hate me. They think I should not exist. Some of them do, David said honestly. But not all. I have been reading comments from viewers. Many people are curious. Some are supportive. A few have shared their own experiences with neurodivergent family members who were hidden away. Duke Raldaz called for my removal from any state function. He is gathering support from conservative council members. He wants to pass a resolution that prevents anyone with cognitive differences from holding public positions. I know, but your mother is fighting back. So is your sister. Lyrian looked up surprised. Natera had always been kind but distant. She loved her younger sister, but she had also been embarrassed by her. Everyone knew it, even if they did not say it directly. David pulled up a video on his own datapad. Crown Princess Natera stood before the Council of Bloodlines. She wore her full ceremonial robes, and her expression was fierce. I have served this empire my entire life, Natera said in the recording. I have been called brilliant and capable and worthy, but I am not the most intelligent person in this royal family. That honor belongs to my sister. For 23 years, I have watched you dismiss her because she does not communicate the way you expect. I participated in that dismissal, and I am ashamed. Duke Raldaz tried to interrupt, but Natera spoke over him. Princess Lyrian identified flaws in trade routes that our best engineers missed. She did it in under 2 hours. She has been teaching herself advanced mathematics and astrophysics with no formal instruction because no one thought to provide it. She has been observing state affairs and forming insights that could benefit us all. But you want to silence her because her brain works differently than yours. That is not strength. That is fear. The recording ended. Lyrian felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Your sister has become your strongest advocate, David said. She is using her influence to protect you. Lyrian typed slowly that I never thought Nadera believed in me. She always seemed disappointed that I was not like her. Perhaps she was disappointed in herself for not seeing who you really are. People can change, Lyrian. Your mother changed. Your sister is changing. Even some of the council members are beginning to question their assumptions. A message alert appeared on Lyrian's screen. It was from the Torvin collective scientist she had provided route analysis for. She opened it. Princess Lyrian, your specifications for the northern route were perfect. You identified the exact problem our team had been struggling with for months. We have implemented your suggested solution. I wanted you to know that my son has similar neurology to yours. I have kept him hidden because I fear judgment. Watching your courage has inspired me to let him pursue his interests openly. Thank you. Lyrian showed the message to David. He smiled. You are changing more than trade routes. You are changing how people think about different minds. Another message came through. Then another. Engineers requesting analysis. Scientists asking questions. And surprisingly, several young Karthani writing say they have been hiding their own differences but were now considering coming forward. This is bigger than one princess, David said. You have started a conversation that your entire species needs to have. But what if I fail? What if I make a mistake and prove Duke Ralthaz right? Then you make a mistake. All analysts make mistakes. All diplomats have bad days. The difference is that when you make an error, they will blame your neurology instead of simple human error. David paused. Well, Karthani error in your case. The point is you will be held to an unfair standard. So why should I try? Because you have something valuable to offer and you deserve the chance to contribute. Because other neurodivergent people are watching and hoping that change is possible. Because your mind works differently and that difference has already proven useful. David set down his tea. But also because you want to. I see it in how excited you get when you solve complex problems. You want to use your abilities. Lyrian thought about the trade routes and the patterns she could see in stellar data that others missed. She thought about the messages from people who had been hiding like she had. She thought about her sister standing before the council and defending her. She picked up her data pad. Duke Ralthaz wants to challenge me publicly. He is demanding that I participate in a traditional council debate. Speaking verbally. Noika Medaschens. He thinks I will fail and prove his point. Will you accept? I cannot debate verbally. I can barely speak a full sentence under pressure. I will prove him right, David nodded slowly. Traditional debate favors a specific communication style. But what if we suggested modified rules? Same debate, but you use your data pad and Ralthaz must respond to your written arguments. He would never agree. He want me to fail the old way to show that accommodation is just making excuses for inability. Probably true, but perhaps the council will see his refusal to adapt as his weakness, not yours. Lyrian rocked in her chair, thinking. A plan formed in her mind. It was risky. It might backfire, but it might also work. She began typing quickly that I will accept his challenge, but with a counteroffer. We both solve the same complex logistical problem under time conditions. He can use verbal explanation. I will use written analysis. The council judges which solution is more effective. We test problem-solving ability, not communication style preference. That is brilliant, David said. You have just reframed the entire challenge. If I win, he has to stop trying to remove me from state functions. If he wins, I voluntarily withdraw from public service. High stakes. Lyrian looked at David, directly meeting his eyes for 3 full seconds before she had to look away. But the message was clear. She was done hiding. The Council of Bloodlines chamber was filled beyond capacity. Representatives from 30 systems had requested permission to observe. Duke Ralthaz stood on one side of the raised platform, wearing traditional debate robes in deep crimson. Lyrian stood on the other side in simple gray with her datapad and headphones. The challenge had been accepted. Both would receive the same complex problem. They would have 2 hours to develop a solution. The council would judge based on effectiveness and practicality, not on presentation style. Chancellor Vormiz stepped to the center. He looked nervous. This entire situation had spiraled beyond normal protocol. The scenario is as follows. A medical transport carrying critical supplies for a plague outbreak has suffered engine failure in the Carthan system. The ship is drifting toward a debris field. Standard rescue vessels cannot reach them in time. You must coordinate a rescue using available resources in that sector. You may access all relevant databases. Begin. Lyrian immediately pulled up star charts and vessel registries. Her fingers flew across her datapad. Duke Ralthaz began speaking to his assistants who brought him information on display screens. The gallery was silent except for the Duke's voice and the soft tapping of Lyrian's typing. After 15 minutes, Ralthaz began presenting his solution. We send the nearest military cruiser from the 7th Fleet. They have the speed and capability to reach the transport before it hits the debris field. We then establish a temporary medical facility on the mining station in Sector 4 until the supplies can be redistributed. It was a reasonable solution, straightforward and practical. The council members nodded approvingly. Lyrian continued working. She cross-referenced fuel consumption rates with distance calculations. She checked maintenance records and crew rotation schedules. She analyzed debris field patterns and projected drift vectors that an hour passed. Ralthaz spent the time elaborating on his plan and answering council questions. He spoke confidently about command chains and resource allocation. He was good at this. Lyrian could see why he held influence. Her mother watched from the Empress's seat, looking tense. Natera sat beside her, gripping the armrests of her chair. David was somewhere in the observer's gallery, but Lyrian could not look for him. She needed to focus. The 90-minute mark Lyrian finished. She connected her datapad to the main display. Her analysis appeared as text with supporting charts and calculations. The council members leaned forward to read. Duke Ralthaz's solution requires the military cruiser from the 7th Fleet. However, according to maintenance logs, that cruiser is currently undergoing engine repairs and cannot achieve necessary speed. His backup option uses ships that would arrive 14 minutes after the transport enters the debris field. Unacceptable risk. Ralthaz's face flushed. The registry shows that cruiser as operational. The registry was updated 3 days ago. The maintenance logs were updated 6 hours ago. The cruiser developed problems during routine patrol. An assistant checked the records. The princess is correct. The cruiser is not flight ready. Lyrian continued. Alternative solution. The mining station in Sector 4 has industrial tractor beams used for moving asteroids. They have sufficient range to catch the transport before it enters the debris field. We redirect a small fast courier ship to transport the medical team to the mining station. They can stabilize patients there while we arrange proper transport to the plague zone. This saves the medical transport and delivers the supplies faster than waiting for military vessels to arrive from distant sectors. The chief engineer examined her calculations. The tractor beams could work. The physics supports it. But the mining station equipment is designed for asteroids, not ships. Too risky. Lyrian was ready for this objection that I access the station's technical specifications. The tractor beams operate on the same principle regardless of target mass. The transport ship is actually lighter than most asteroids they move regularly. I have calculated the necessary beam strength and duration. It is well within safety parameters. I have also identified 3 engineers on the mining station who have experience with precision beam work. They can handle the operation. She brought up personnel files showing the engineers' qualifications. Furthermore, my solution uses civilian resources already in position. Duke Ralthaz's solution requires military deployment, which has political implications if this occurs near Torvin space. Mining stations are neutral. No diplomatic complications. The council members whispered among themselves. Several were nodding. Duke Ralthaz spoke loudly. This is an untested approach. My solution uses proven military protocols. Your proven military protocols require ships that are not available. My solution uses existing resources in creative ways. The question is not which method is traditional. The question is which method saves lives. Silence filled the chamber. The Empress stood. I believe we have seen enough. Council members, you will vote on which solution is more effective. The vote took 5 minutes. When Chancellor Vormiz announced the results, his voice was strained. 27 votes for Princess Lyrian's solution. 8 votes for Duke Raldaz's approach. The gallery erupted in conversation. Raldaz looked like he had been struck. He had lost badly, and everyone knew it. Princess Lyrian demonstrated superior analysis, the head counselor said. She identified problems with the proposed military solution and provided a creative alternative that addressed multiple concerns. Her approach was thorough and practical. Raldaz gathered his robes. This proves nothing. One scenario does not demonstrate consistent capability. Actually, it does. I have been analyzing state problems for years. I have solutions prepared for 17 current situations, ranging from trade disputes to resource allocation. I simply had no way to present them before now. Would you like to review my work? Lyrian's challenge was clear. She was not just defending her right to participate. She was demonstrating that her exclusion had cost the Empire valuable insights. Duke Raldaz left the chamber without responding. The Empress descended from her seat and walked to her daughter. Lyrian, I am creating a new position. Imperial Analytical Advisor. It is yours if you want it. You will review proposals and provide strategic analysis. You will communicate through whatever methods work for you. And anyone who dismisses your contributions will answer to me personally. Lyrian typed quickly that I accept. Natera joined them and did something unexpected. She hugged her sister carefully from the side, so Lyrian could pull away if needed. I am proud of you, Natera whispered. I am so proud of you. Later that evening, David found Lyrian in her quarters. She was reviewing messages. Dozens of them. Young Carthani who had been hiding their differences were asking questions. Scientists from other species wanted to collaborate. Engineers requested consultations. You changed the world today, David said. Lyrian looked at him and typed that I changed one mind at a time, starting with my own. I used to think I was broken because I could not be like everyone else. You taught me that different is not the same as less. That was the real change. What will you do now? Lyrian smiled and turned back to her screen full of messages from people who needed someone to see them the way David had seen her. Now, I help others understand what you taught me. That everyone's mind has value even when it works in unexpected ways. That accommodation is not weakness. That the galaxy is big enough for all kinds of thinking. She paused, then added one more line, and I will keep dancing in my own way. 6 months after the council challenged Lyrian, walked through the corridors of Imperial Station Meridian without keeping to the shadows. Palace staff nodded respectfully when they saw her. Some even asked questions about pending proposals they knew she was reviewing. The station had changed. Small changes, but important ones. Quiet rooms were available in every major building where people could retreat when overwhelmed. Communication devices were provided for anyone who preferred written or typed speech. Sensory accommodations were standard rather than shameful. Other changes were bigger. 17 young Carthani had come forward as neurodivergent and were now pursuing education and careers they had thought impossible. 3 had joined Lyrian's analytical team. Together, they reviewed everything from infrastructure projects to diplomatic proposals. The Empress had faced resistance from conservative factions, but she had not backed down. When Duke Raldaz tried to introduce legislation limiting public roles for neurodivergent individuals, Natera had led a coalition to defeat it. The vote had been close, but the old ways were cracking. Today was special, though. Today, the Galactic Assembly was hosting a summit on cognitive diversity. Delegates from 40 systems had come to discuss how their societies could better accommodate different minds. It was the first summit of its kind. Lyrian entered the main hall and felt the familiar spike of anxiety. Crowds were still difficult. Noise still hurt. But she had her headphones and her stone and her datapad. She had tools now instead of just tolerance. David stood near the human delegation area. He waved when he saw her, and she raised her hand in return. He had been promoted to lead cultural advisor for Earth's diplomatic corps. Apparently, his work with Lyrian had demonstrated skills his superiors valued. Ready for today? David asked when she approached. Lyrian pulled out her datapad. Nervous, but prepared. I have notes on 17 different accommodation strategies that other species might find useful. You're going to do great. The summit began with opening remarks from various delegates. The Torvin ambassador spoke about her son who was studying engineering openly now instead of hiding his differences. A Kelthran scientist discussed research into neurodivergent cognition. A Relian educator outlined new teaching methods. Then it was Lyrian's turn. She walked to the speaker's platform. Her mother and sister sat in the front row. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy watched and waited. Lyrian connected her datapad. Her words appeared on the display screens. 0.6 months ago, I danced with a human diplomat who saw me as a person instead of a problem. That moment changed my life. Not because he fixed me, but because he recognized I was never broken. Today I want to talk about what I have learned. She paused to let the translators catch up. Accommodation is not special treatment. It is removing barriers that prevent capable individuals from contributing. When I was forced to communicate verbally, I was considered incompetent. When I was allowed to write, I proved valuable. The problem was never my mind. The problem was a system designed for only one type of mind. More text appeared as she typed. Different does not mean less. My brain processes patterns and data in ways that help me see solutions others miss. But I struggle with things others find easy, like verbal conversation and unexpected touch. Both of these facts are true. I am not defined by only my strengths or only my challenges. I am the complete picture of both. In the audience, a young Karthani student was crying. Her mother held her hand tightly. Lyrian recognized them from messages. The daughter had been kept home from school because teachers said she was too difficult. Every species here today has individuals whose minds work differently. Some of you are hiding them. Some are hiding yourselves. I understand why. Fear of judgment is powerful, but hiding means losing valuable perspectives and condemning people to isolation. Lyrian looked up from her typing and scanned crowd. She made brief eye contact with several beings before returning to her screen. That I am not asking you to pity neurodivergent individuals. I am asking you to recognize our capabilities. Provide communication tools. Reduce sensory overload in public spaces. Design education and work around different processing styles. Let us contribute in our own ways. You'll be surprised by what we can do when barriers are removed instead of people. The hall was completely silent. My sister once told me I would never be useful to the Empire. She was wrong, but her mistake was understandable. She had been taught that useful meant thinking and communicating exactly as she does. Now she knows better. Now she's one of my strongest allies. People can change. Societies can change. But it starts with truly seeing all the different ways minds can be brilliant. Lyrian disconnected her pad and returned to her seat. For a moment, nothing happened. Then someone started tapping their fingers against their chair in the Karthani gesture of deep respect. Others joined. The sound built into a rhythm that filled the hall. It was not applause. It was better. It was recognition. After the formal sessions ended, there was a reception. Lyrian stayed for exactly 1 hour, which was her limit for large gatherings. Several delegates approached with questions. A few shared their own experiences. One Torvin mother asked if Lyrian would consider consulting on educational reforms for her home system. Lyrian agreed and added another project to her growing list. David found her on an observation deck later. She was looking out at the stars and running her fingers along the textured wall panel. "They're calling you the voice of a movement," David said. Lyrian typed without looking away from the stars that I am one voice. There are millions of others who need to be heard. I was lucky. My mother is an empress. My sister has influence. You happen to notice me at a dance. Most neurodivergent individuals do not have those advantages. So what comes next? Lyrian turned to face him. I create a network. Connect neurodivergent individuals across species. Share accommodation strategies. Provide support. Advocate for systemic changes, not just individual exceptions. I want the next autistic princess or farmer or scientist to have opportunities without needing an empress's decree. That is ambitious. It is necessary. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Through the window, they could see ships from a dozen species docked at the station. Each carried delegates who were beginning to question old assumptions. "Do you remember what you asked me that first night?" David said. When we danced. Lyrian nodded. You asked through your signs if I truly saw you. I want you to know that I see you even more clearly now. Not just as the princess who proved everyone wrong, but as the person who is changing how the galaxy thinks about different minds. Lyrian typed quickly. You saw me before I saw myself. Before my mother saw me. Before anyone did. That matters more than anything that came after. You taught me that being seen is the first step to being valued. Music drifted from the reception hall. Someone had started traditional dances. David held out his hand, palm up the way he had 6 months ago. Would you like to dance? The same way we did before. Your way. Lyrian took his hand. They found a quiet corner where the music was softer. They swayed gently without worrying about proper form or traditional steps. Around them, other beings moved in standard patterns. But Lyrian and David danced differently, and that was perfectly fine. Through the window, the stars shone steady. Somewhere out, there were countless minds working in countless ways. Solving problems, creating art, building futures. Some of those minds processed the world like Lyrians did. And slowly, system by system, they were being allowed to contribute openly. The galaxy was learning what David had known from the beginning. That different minds made the universe richer. That accommodation was not weakness, but wisdom. That everyone deserved to be seen, truly seen for who they really were. Lyrian hummed along with the music. Her voice was quiet but sure. She was not hiding anymore. She was not pretending to be someone else. She was simply being herself in a galaxy that was finally learning to make room for minds like hers. The dance ended. David bowed. Lyrian signed thank you in the old formal way. Then she added one more sign. The one that had started everything. You see me, and David signed back in the Carthani gesture language he had been learning. I see you. I have always seen you, and I always will.